Lisa, thanks so much for joining us today. I am so excited to meet you and to talk with you and learn more about you. You're this whole thing I knew nothing about.
Oh my gosh. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Delighted to be back in my hometown.
How long has it been since you've been back to Indianapolis?
I haven't been back for 15 years, but even then it was brief. And when I came 15 years ago, I came for a book signing for my first cookbook. And I was in a bookstore in Broad Ripple and really haven't been back to the city in so long. It's like, oh my goodness, this changed so much.
It looks great, doesn't it?
Oh my gosh, I can't believe the downtown. That's all I've seen. I just got here last night, but it looks glorious.
Yeah. For people that are just joining us, I mean, it's just so interesting to learn about you and your life. You were raised here in Indianapolis, but you went on to become quite the celebrity entrepreneur and culinary chef out in Sedona, having 6 restaurants out there with 5 different concepts, 300 employees, books, and now a documentary about your life. How cool is that?
It's pretty startling, to be honest.
Yeah.
It seems like it was just yesterday when I opened my first restaurant, but we're nearly 30 years young, and it's just amazing what has transpired. And I'm still as excited as I was in the very beginning.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting as I'm learning about your story because of this documentary, Lisa Dahl, Blessed by Grace. And it introduced me to you. And I thought, wow, what a great story that you have, a story of resilience and survival and a lot of chutzpah as well, I might add. So maybe let's just kind of start at the beginning and walk us through about, your life here in Indianapolis and how we got to where you are here today.
It's interesting that you say that, chutzpah. I guess I was kind of born with it in a way. I grew up from a family that had a lot of it, and it was just a great time growing up. My mother was a fashionista before we used that word. She was an entrepreneur at a very early age, and she started her first stores at the Indianapolis Speedway. And I have to think that she put fashion on the map back in the days. For those that don't, or let's say for those that have been around, the stores were called my mother's name, Dorothy. I can just remember being a little teeny kid running around the store, fascinated with all the clothing and the accessories. My mother's taste was outstanding. She was a trendsetter in her own right. She just loved fashion and loved merchandising and creating vignettes. And I think that kind of must have rubbed off on me a bit when it comes to restaurant design, because I do see the correlation. But that was her thing. And so clothing and dressing up and all kinds of festivities, helping people to find their perfect outfits. I grew up pretty much on the stockroom floor. She had us. We had 4 kids within a 5-year period.
Wow.
So we were all in the retail. And that, I think, really did instill a sense of hospitality. So I did that all of my youth working for my parents. My mother ended up with other stores. She migrated to Lafayette Square when it became the new project. Then she had a wonderful store in Glendale back in the day and created a store that was a cave, which was so innovative for its time. She had dressing rooms with stalactites and very, very far out mom and dad that I had, but my mother was very visionary, to be honest with you, with her particular venue of clothing stores. And then our third one was at Keystone at the Crossing. And so she stayed in retail for 38 years. And she kind of, I want to say, love-hated it at the end, because retail's hard. And a lot of sacrifices, very similar to the restaurant business. My parents would always be coming home at like 11 on Christmas Eve and things like that, always about the customer service and dealing with all the ins and outs of having really successful businesses. They had employees that had been with my parents for since the very beginning. One of my brothers actually kind of ran one of the stores, so it was in some ways kind of similar to the restaurant business, a lot less messy, not quite as complicated, but it taught me a work ethic that I think has served me very well over the years.
Yeah. And you were a bit of a rebel as a teen?
I was kind of out there.
What does that
I
mean?
loved it. Well, it means I lived up to my Aquarian image. I always wanted to be trying new things and getting out there, very freedom-loving, probably a little more than my parents' nerves could handle. And I just wanted to get out and smell the roses at a very early age. So yeah, I was a bit of a rebel for the times. Probably would be innocent compared to some of the things that we hear today. But yeah, I was always loved to be very socially engaged and have a lot of friends and a few other things.
Well, and a very, special thing. Justin, your son, you were a teenage mom.
Yes, I did. I was an early mom. I had my son at 17, which was like a kid raising a kid. But it was such an amazing thing. It taught me how to grow up. It taught me, how to nurture and take care of my son. And as we grew up together somewhat, he would always get embarrassed because people would say, "Is this your girlfriend?" "No, that's my mom." Yeah, but we had a great time in our younger years here because we lived in southern Indiana. And we lived down in Needmore, outside of Brown County, in a very interesting community. And at one point, I was a little concerned for his security. I had a boyfriend at the time who I think was just not, he was trying to be a good role model, but he really wasn't. I was very worried that Justin would have some type of an accident if he was, in care of Justin. And so I planned my escape route, and we ran away from Indiana to the Bay Area, San Francisco, and there I lived for the next 2 decades in Marin County.
Yeah, how was life there?
Well, it's a difference of night and day. The area that I lived in, southern Indiana, was really neat. There was all kinds of innovative things going. I always loved to cook, and people were growing their own vegetables and probably a few other things, maybe back then.
Oh, do tell.
But the people were great, and I had a very idyllic life. I was working in an incredible gallery in Brown County, in Nashville. Had great friends there, but it was time for me to move on, and I did kind of do a very quick exit stage left. A friend picked me up, took me to the airport, and I flew to Marin. I honestly didn't know anybody. It was just a crazy thing. I flew into San Francisco, needless to say, and I was introduced to a friend from Indianapolis who lived at Muir Beach, and I was offered a place to stay and also quite an incredible job. And of course, I fell right into the clothing business, and I started working in this incredibly idyllic, gorgeous boutique right on Bridgeway in Sausalito. As luck would have it, it was quite a job. And I could sit in my boutique and just look at the bay right across the way and walk through Bridgeway. And it was just an incredible, more than 180-degree differential there. because it was coastal, and I loved that, and that was new to me. And also, back in those days, it was still very prolific. Farmers markets and all kinds of things that were different than I'd ever been exposed to. A completely different way of life. You have the city so close by, and yet if you live in Marin, you're surrounded by beautiful hikes and trails and just everything very gorgeous and milk and honey kind of life. Just in growing up in that environment, starting in first grade, he loved it, and he made his friends so easily, and we had really quite a great life. And I just continued in working in boutiques. I did run that boutique for a long time. What I was fascinated by were really incredible handmade textiles, the blouses that I was selling, a very unique type of blouse. It was very bohemian, fashionable. And then I left working for him, and I started working in the city. And I worked for an incredible Japanese woman and her family in very contemporary clothing. And that was equally as exciting, right on Fillmore Street. You're bringing me back to I'm just like having a major deja vu. But I loved that, and I stayed with that family. The store was called Koso, and I stayed with them for a number of years and loved it. And then I transitioned into wholesale and started working as a representative of different fashion, from accessories, and that would take me traveling all through the West Coast. As things evolved, I became a rep, and I would go out on my journeys, and it taught me a lot about just confidence and navigating, and getting in the car and being kind of a little bit of a traveler in a way that I never had been.
Yeah, yeah. It sounds like such an idyllic life in a way, in such a beautiful area, and just not the scene for the tragedy that was to unfold.
Yes, and I never could have ever imagined what happened with my son. He was in his 20s, and he was out and about, and Justin was in love with music. Everything revolved around music. He was, I believe, probably could have become a professional musician, but he lived for music, and so did his friends. Quite honestly, so did I. I would be singing every day. I loved singing, and I was, my idols were Joni Mitchell, Bonnie Raitt, so I'd always be singing, and he'd always be spinning his records, even from a very, very young boy. Actually, kind of going back a little bit, we actually had a record store in Carmel. Before I moved away, we had our record store. It was called Blue River. And so he kind of grew up in a record store environment and was always spinning his records and playing his little drum set. So music was his passion. And as he grew older, he collected rare records. And on that fateful day, he had borrowed my bike, unbeknownst to me, ridden his bike over the Golden Gate Bridge into the Haight-Ashbury to collect records at a store there that, unbeknownst to me, he would even know how to get there. But he was in his early 20s, so he could have the freedom, but I couldn't imagine that he'd ridden over the Golden Gate Bridge. And he engaged in trying to help someone that he believed had stolen something from a person that appeared to be semi-crippled. He saw a backpack getting stolen off of this handicapped man's back, and he raced to retrieve it, and he was killed. And that is the worst day of my entire life.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah. It was something I never want to remember, that feeling, if I can help it. Nowadays, we hear violent killings every day, terrible tragedies in any news, in any city that we live in. But back then, it was very rare. And there had been one other Good Samaritan killing at that time. And the city of San Francisco really embraced my son as a Good Samaritan. And he became known as the Golden Boy. And I'll never forget, as long as I live, the love and incredible support that came through all areas of the Bay Area. People that had never even known Justin, and then many that had, just embraced him as a hero of his times. And it still to this day is amazing to me how many lives my son has touched. I mean, through him losing his life, he has touched, I would have to say, in the millions of lives through his courageous act, but also people knew that he was just a very unique, very elevated young man. My son was so peaceful and tranquil, and I think that mothers from all over just, their hearts were broken for what we went through. I'll never forget a mother and daughter that reached out to me, and this still stays with me. They said that they could feel Justin, his energy on the street after it happened. Hours later, they were walking through the hate, and they could feel Justin, his ethereal essence, his aura, was still lingering. So,
And ultimately, you decided it would be best for you to move from there.
I had to somehow separate myself from those memories. It was, he grew up from first grade all the way through his young adulthood, and all of his friends, many who still actually follow on Facebook, those memories were just too haunting. All of the places we loved, our favorite places to eat in Marin. He was kind of he was the face of this particular new wave of coffee shops that were just cropping up back then in San Rafael. And he was the mascot of sorts. He skateboarded. He was great with his type of music, his spinning, it was called back then. And he was just the coolest kid and had cool friends and wonderful friends. To this day, I hear from them on Facebook mostly. I would love for them to come out to Sedona and visit, but they're big kids now. They are very big kids. They're grown-ups. They're all have great lives, I believe, many. It just was unimaginable to really stay and in the depth of my pain. And I was introduced to Sedona several years before by a friend who took me for a short trip, because there was always this feeling that Northern California and Northern Arizona had certain similar energies. They were very different and very organic, and I aligned with that, and I kept hearing about Sedona all the time finally I took a short journey, and I thought, oh my gosh, it's so exotic and beautiful and different. There was really, it was not a lot going on back then in Sedona. It was not developed, but it was very beautiful. And I enjoyed the trip, but I never really gave it a thought that I would live there. Vis-a-vis, several years later, when I was trying to think where would I feel safe to move that would not be so far away, it came to me that Sedona, being known for very deep restorative healing properties, metaphysical and nature, would be a great place to maybe find a home. Now at that time, I was still traveling back to the Bay Area to bring in some money to survive. I had that job, and that job was adding so much pain to what my daily life, because all of my buyers that I worked with and my friends in the fashion industry at that time, my biggest client were Nordstrom's for my footwear line that I was representing. And all my buyers had become friends, and I would go to my appointments just raw. And I just couldn't go through the motions anymore. So I had moved with a boyfriend, but he was a rather new boyfriend at the time, but he was a professional chef. And in the idyllic time before my son was killed, we were just getting together and very fond of each other and very fond and compatible at cooking. So we would cook all kinds of great things when he was off work and when I was off work. He's an Italian chef and I was an Italian cook, let's say. When you live in the Bay Area, the influence of Italian restaurants, especially back then and forever, quite honestly, Italian not Little Italy, but the North Beach, all of this. But I love the natural California style of Italian cooking. That really was just part of my nature. Farmers markets, go get the tomatoes, get the basil, get the best of bread, get the pasta, the extra virgin olive oil, you got to feast, right? Pasta pomodoro, I just, simple Italian, but very natural style. And then us teaming up and having fun, and Justin, the kids, and everybody always being over, cooking was always a part of my soul. Even when I was as young as 16, my favorite things were creating new things, but always leaning towards very healthy. And so a lot of my cooking back then was vegetarian. I wasn't a staunch vegetarian, I certainly was when I was younger, but I just loved that style of cooking, and I think that to this day, it really is the essence of my style. And the more natural, the more vegetable forward and produce and all that great stuff. So we would cook together, and we had different styles, but they did align. And when we found the restaurant space, which was quite a bit after moving there, I was fortunate and found a charming little house that was being built, and I was able to purchase it. And believe me, I didn't have a lot of money. My grandmother had given me an inheritance when she passed away, a very small amount, but I was able to make the down payment and also able to help us to get the lease going of the restaurant. So the restaurant was, I believe, quite honestly, I do believe it was a guided fortune from Justin, because a woman that I had met decided that she was not able to continue to run her restaurant in the way that she would like. And she more or less said, you need a new baby, and I'd like to offer you my space. It was a business transition, but it was really like something you could feel that was magic. It was meant to be, and that is the home of Dal and Tuca Ristorante Italiano. My first, I will always say, my favorite. All the other restaurants, no, I love them dearly, but that restaurant has a soul, and many people can feel it when they walk in. It's changed so much over the years. I mean, when we opened the restaurant, we had no money, so we inherited the chairs. Of course, we inherited the kitchen equipment and all those things, and this was originally a Sonic burger. No one will ever know it, and I shouldn't have even said it because you wouldn't know it. It is an absolutely stunning, beautiful, very refined restaurant, but smoke and mirrors. I love to decorate, I love to design, and over the years, I remember when we started, we had bright yellow, school bus yellow, also good color for Italian, but our colors of our walls were bright yellow. Now they're a gorgeous Venetian plaster, but over the years, as we became more popular, successful, little by little, you know, I would change the chairs, or as you do, always refreshing restaurants, but it was such a great restaurant, still is. I'm doing a project right now as we speak. I'm gonna do something that I'm like a little kid. I'm so excited, but it was a very idyllic and exciting to be able to put my love in for Justin and into forgetting from moments the tragedy that led me there. I could immerse in putting love into the restaurant, putting love into the food. As soon as we got into that little kitchen, which is still a very little kitchen, it's not changed, I would start making soups and sauces. And I was always more the foundational part of the culinary, and my partner at the time was very incredibly masterful in saute techniques that, you know, truly make or break Italian cuisine. You put great sauces and great foundations, and you put someone that has a style of what makes Italian either good or phenomenal, is that style of the saute when it comes to seafood dishes and the type of things that we're known for and still are. So over the years, there's been a lot of transition, but the soul can be tasted in the food.
So run down the list of the restaurants. That was the baby,
Yes,
and then
that's
who
the
were all the
baby.
cousins?
Yes, the babies, and so we call Dal and Tuca D&D for short. Everyone goes, are you going to D&D? D&D became a hub. In the time that we started this restaurant, there was a couple other very notable restaurants. But if I told you in my memory, there's probably 5 restaurants of notability in that town back in the mid-90s. So we became the talk of the town, needless to say, getting to know everyone. I worked, cooked, and never left that restaurant for 9 years, and then had an opportunity to build a second restaurant, which was more of a build out. There was a foundation, but there was nothing structured in the restaurant itself. And so it was an amazing project. To this day, I marvel every time I walk into Cucina Rustica. Cucina Rustica just had its 22nd anniversary this June. She's a very powerful restaurant. what sets her apart from the mothership, which is one beautiful long room, meaning D&D, with a beautiful patio now. But I was able to build a restaurant that resembles like a villa with separate rooms. And to this day, what I can do there that I can't do in any other restaurant is have different events going on, dinner soirees in charming rooms that resemble Provence, France. Some rooms, I have one room I call the Provence, another room which is the Taverna. Each room has a different feel, but they all fit together. So when you walk in, you're surrounded by antique columns, gates, and wood windows and doors that I was able to collect prior to installing them into the foundation. I collected the doors in different exotic places. Some were pulled out of buildings in some cases, and some from a particular place that I found in southern Arizona. And there were antiquities from around the world that create, along with the faux finishes and the wall plasterings and things, the look of a 100-year-old authentic villa of sorts. But it allows one's imagination to see it as where maybe they think it looks like somewhere in ancient in Italy. I originally thought I was bringing forth a feeling of old Spain. But at that time, when I wanted to do Spanish cuisine and Spanish tapas, because I was fortunate when I was in the footwear business to travel to Spain, and I was so intrigued with the tapas and the Mediterranean cuisine that I thought, boy, would this be different from D&D, Cucina Rustica, rustic kitchen. I'll do Spanish tapas and a different style of cuisine, not so disjointed from Italian, but different. But it was too ahead of its time. That was not relatable in a tourist town like Sedona back in the day before culinary really became, as innovative as it is. And so I kind of went back to my safe zone and just did Italian, but Italian with a hint of Mediterranean, which I still influence. I think they are so very similar, but in other words, I could do like Greek plates and do things that I couldn't do in my more traditional Italian. And the environment is so perfect for that. It has a rustic feel, and the cuisine is more country, a little more peasanty. We still have the same classics. My bolognese is, 30 years I've been creating my mother sauce and bolognese and these various signature sauces, but we'll do things just a little bit different. But philosophically, the same, all organic vegetables and salads that are off the charts. And we're just, we're very natural, but very, we feed each other because one could not do the bigger events and the other can, or not just bigger, just having charming little rehearsal dinners or small weddings and things, some corporate things as well, but that's what keeps us going in that restaurant, whereas the original is too small to take large groups. It gets too noisy and crazy, which I love. Yeah. I love the feeling of a bustling restaurant, but not all the guests do. So I cooked at Cucina Rustica and adorned it and continue, quite honestly, always a work in progress with restaurants, because my philosophy is feed them love, the guest will feel it. And I don't like when restaurants get stale, so you're always freshening and doing new art or some something new. Of course, always refreshing the cuisine, seasonally, especially in our neck of the woods. Seasonal is very important, as it is in throughout all of the restaurant industry. But in our case, with working with the organic farms, and one in particular that I get the mainstay of my produce is working with that farmer, my dear friend Bob McClendon, with, well, what's coming out? Oh, well, squash blossoms are coming. So, you know, we can interpret them at differently in both restaurants. So I cooked every day at Cucina Rustica, and of course I would always be back and forth with Dal and Tuca. But at this point, after quite a long time, a long struggle, I was able to buy my partner out. And that was not the easiest thing I've ever been through. It's a story unto itself. But that allowed me to have the freedom of choice to do the things that I wanted to do. And I was really wanted to have a wood fire pizzeria. It was something that I just thought would be the greatest. I thought it would be very easy. Pizza's easier than fine dining, I thought. Boy, did I learn a lesson. But after a decade, I migrated myself into a new venture called Pisa Lisa. And the reason it came about in the way that it did was I was offered a space that had been an old Pizza Hut. Ironically, by some folks that I was introduced to that lived in Marin County. So it was like, again, this synchronicity type of really amazing opportunity. I could have bought it, and darn it, I wish I had bought the property. They won't sell it to me. But I've been a happy renter for 11 years now. Pisa Lisa is a phenomenon. And I've also opened a second wood fire pizzeria in the other part of town by Cucina Rustica. So I have a baby and a bigger one, and the bigger one is the newer one. And it's really special. It's still kind of an infant. I think of restaurants like children. And one's growing up and one is still an infant. But Pisa Lisa, and again, flashing back to the Bay Area, pizza was a big deal. And mastering the crust and the dough, of course, and developing a style of your own in the pizza business is what makes or breaks you. And in San Francisco Bay Area, although pizza is centuries old, as we know, but the trend of wood fire Neapolitan style pizzas was booming when I left. And so here, many years later, I wanted to get my feet wet, get my fingers sticky, and try a new style of cuisine. And a Pizza Hut is not a wood fire pizza shell. So converting the Pizza Hut, starting by taking the crazy rooftop off that looked like a little hamlet, shearing that off, smoke and mirrors, changing all the decor. People to this day, and now I'm saying this, but to this day now they'll come in and go, what's this, a Pizza Hut? And I go, you figured it out. It's the crazy windows that were a funny shape. And even that I found a fun way to camouflage, but it's a cooker. The restaurant is so popular. I mean, you could go by there at 10 o'clock at night and there's still people many times waiting out. But it was not easy. And it put me through a tremendous amount of just stress and put me on my knees a few times because I found out something that I had not known prior, that people can be very critical and very hurtful. And I also found out that I didn't know that much about the pizza business until
So you were in
people
it.
were, yes. And it was never about the food per se. It wasn't about, well, we don't like your style of pizza per se. It was actually, it was just the mechanics. It was totally different. And it taught me a lot, and it still teaches me a lot. I think we were just, it was timing. I talk about timing a lot. When you open a restaurant can make or break you. If you're gullible and silly and crazy enough to open up on a holiday weekend, you're going to get your, kicked. And we did. And it was hard to recover from that. And needless to say, I found out that the timing was also interesting because there were many new pizzerias opening in the so-called vicinity. And maybe there were some naysayers from that standpoint. I keep my mouth shut. But it was humbling. And I thought I would lose the business. And I would cry and I would say I'm giving up and what am I going to do? And I was at my wit's end. I was brought an incredible message through a very dear friend who was a person that I knew her and the family because I would cater for them in the early days. And I don't think anyone knew how desperate I was feeling. I mean, I was in the throes of this and I wasn't even really talking to people. I was just mortified and heartsick at the same time that we were getting negative reviews, and I think social media had really just begun. But nonetheless, an incredible message came through my friend whose son had had a dream and was very mystified by his dream because he had never met my son. No one has ever met Justin, of course, because Justin was never physically in Sedona. But this young man had a dream that somewhat troubled him. He was afraid to reach out to me and tell me, so he had his mother reach out. He said he had seen what he believed could be Justin in a dream, and he saw himself going into Pisa Lisa, and he saw a thin, golden-haired young man at the pizza oven, and he turned around and looked him in the eyes and said, "You tell my mother everything is going to be okay. I am with her always." That was it. She had been trying to reach me for weeks, quite honestly. She kept leaving messages, "Give me a call when you can." I don't know how we were missing each other. One day, she was at Dal and Tuca with her mother, and she took me aside and she told me the dream that her son Michael had had. It literally just changed everything for me. I was able to renew my conviction. I just took that message as he is with me. He is watching over me. He can help me, but I need to help myself. And I just rolled up the sleeves. Not that I didn't work every day anyways, But I started to really figure out what was wrong. And, you know, everything in restaurant business is feng shui. And there were things that I figured out that were holding us back. Mostly it was service. There were structural things. But there was also my mentality was, they're not gonna get me down. I will not cower to the negativity or to the naysayers and to the forces of evil that don't want us to succeed. It was like this. Started making pizzas all the time, making pizzas. I always loved making our salads, our antipasto, of course, still do. But I named many of my best pizzas after my family's names. So I named a very special pizza after Justin. It's called Da Justino. I named one of my most famous after my mother and my father, Da Dorothy, Da, because my dad's family and him, Chicago natives, until he met my mother and moved to Indianapolis. It was all about Chicago. Sorry, Indy. Dad loved Chicago. Da Bears, da Sox, blah, blah. And so I named the pizzas after them. And as I'm making pizzas, I need a Da Dorothy, need a Da Justino. And I felt that they could hear me on the other side. It just was like cha-chink, cha-chink music to my ears, hearing their names, knowing that that connected. My father never got to walk in or try the pizza. He was the inspiration because he loved pizza. Lived in Chicago, lived for pizza, and courted my mother on pizza. That was one of his date nights, was pizza. So and that was probably deeply embedded in my soul why I wanted to have a pizzeria, but I just did. And so when I started connecting that dots and kind of doing, it's like almost like, you know, pennies from heaven. Not about the money, never been about the money. It was just hearing their names, knowing they could, and my mother was still alive. Oh, she enjoyed a Pisa Lisa until a few months before she finally did pass in Sedona. But I knew that if she had a pizza in her name, it was like date night for mom and dad. And it was so fun. But the energy was night and day. I have to tell you, that restaurant, see, it told me that if you listen to the negative, if you let that pull you down, there's always jealousy. I fight that every day. I literally do, and I don't fight it. Now, I'm stronger. I'm more seasoned. I literally wear blinders. I don't take it in. Wouldn't matter who's saying what about me, because in little town they always do. Mm-hmm. I was fortunate to create restaurants organically, naturally. It wasn't, I'm coming to Sedona to take over the town of Sedona and build restaurants. These were a decade apart, but they were creative expressions to bring people together. And that's what it's always been about for me, is just that feeling of bringing people together that they can celebrate. In many ways, the ways that I could no longer with family, with, you know, that convivial thing when people get together over food in wonderful, safe and beautiful environments to celebrate a piece of life every day. And so that addiction fed opportunities to come my way, and the pizzeria is, I call her my wild child. It's not like the others. They all have personalities, grand personalities, but you know, the great music, it's a backdrop of wonderful choreographed rock and roll music with great music posters that my brother has collected through the years, inherited many really awesome archival music posters of great rock figures that we all love and admire, a lot of Beatles, of course. And they are the backdrop of both of the restaurants, music and food, which is, again, how I grew up, is surrounded by music. My father was a jazz aficionado. He loved jazz. And so in my house as a kid, jazz was always pumping into the bedrooms. I mean, my mother would sometimes scream, "Turn down that music." But we grew up with a very strong foundation of loving music, and to this day I just live for music. As I told you, Justin lived for music. But you go into the restaurants, there's always going to be music in the air or live music, because that, again, is bringing back that family thing that I feel Dad's proud.
No doubt he's proud. And it's amazing to me because you have no formal education. I mean, did you graduate from high school?
Well, you're going to get me to admit something
Yeah,
that I have not.
Well,
That,
I mean,
other than my age, I'll never tell. But no, I did not graduate. I ran away. I ran away from high school. I wanted to have my son, and I did drop out, and I have a hard time saying that to this day. It's very hard for me, but I've been practicing saying it a little bit more, because I think it is something that is not something I encourage, but somehow I guess my perseverance and zest for life has allowed me to succeed even without high school and college education.
Well, but if you talk about, you know, the retail from your mom and the music from your dad and, you know, the music with Justin, and you think of all these building blocks to get that was your education, right? That was your training. And you tell this whole story, you live this whole life, and it's like, she's not cooking yet. When does she become the executive chef, you know? I mean, it's amazing how this all builds together and comes together to create these environments of aesthetic, of music and entertainment, and food. And you've been so successul.
Oh, Thank you.
You taught
Thank
yourself.
you. I still don't, you know, I don't think it does sink in, and I really don't. I know it sounds silly that I just see me as me, you know, the Indiana-born girl that, you know, I think in some ways, because it was always a pursuit of love and passion. This is a silly thing to say, but I never thought of restaurants as making money. It's just crazy, you know, business, make money. That wasn't my thing. I was like, I want to express. And to this day, I think I'm a little bit crazy, because of course you have to know about the dollars and the cents and the bottom line and the P&Ls and all that I've learned. As if you don't, you'll be out of there. But I also believe the things that we have succeeded at, even making it through COVID, is a miracle. That 6 restaurants, thank you, Justin, have survived the worst pandemic crisis that our hospitality industry has ever faced, especially in a small town. Mm-hmm. At one point losing all of our employees, all of them, 3 at the time. I believe that we had about 340 or so employees. We don't have nearly that many. We've had to learn how to be more creative. We've learned a lot, and we still learn a lot, and every day it is, interviewing people to find those people that have the passion and the dedication that the restaurant business requires. And it's a change of landscape now. It's different as can be. It's been a challenge because when you're in a very small town, which we are, Sedona lost population during the pandemic because many of the rental properties were converted into Airbnbs by people that had the money to buy all the real estate. Vis-a-vis, we didn't have the population base of the employees. They could not afford to live in our area. It just was like this overnight practically, and it's the same that has happened in many resort towns, but that will make or break you. And we are still just looking for people because it's hard for us to get talent from outside of the area because many times they want to come and live in our area, but they can't afford it. So we keep paying more and more, as everyone does in this industry, and all of the labor and wages have gone up, but the amount of people dedicated to want to be chefs, cooks, hosts, servers, all that requires it's a daily challenge, but it's just part of our new way of being in this field. So it teaches you a lot every day, and that is, I think, the addiction that keeps me still very energized on, a business that I really love.
Are you happy with the short? Are you happy with the documentary?
I think that the documentary short is absolutely magical. If I told you that I haven't really watched it as many times as you might think, that sounds crazy. But it's very emotional to me. And when I see it in the theater here at Heartland, at Newfeld's, I will again be probably taken by tears to see the enormity of how that came across on the big screen, because the stunning cinematography, along with the way that the director took the interviews and wove in the very, very vulnerable material and all that we experienced in a very short period of time. When I see it, it's mind-blowing in some ways how in a short piece there could be so much emotional content. It doesn't tell everything that I've told you. We're only scratching the surface here, baby. But it's not that kind of a film anyways. It's a film in hopes of bringing healing to others that go through their own hardships and adversities and continue to live a very abundant life, bringing the love of their beloveds through their daily canvas.
Yeah, he lives on in you for sure. And I truly believe that every storm runs out of rain. And you are just a wonderful example of the growth and the sunshine that was to come in your future. And I just am so happy to meet you, and I thank you for the time that you've given with us today. And I just wish you continued success. I'm so excited for people to see this film and to learn more about Lisa Dahl.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.